recording, and therefore you can watch the video later, which I'll send out, and try all of these tips and tricks yourself. So I will turn it over to Grant, and hopefully we will have some time for Q&A at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rohit. A wonderful introduction. All right, so here's what's going to go down today. So I'm going to go through a number of tools that I use, and the majority of them will be related to my work in the ESC, but obviously very much widely applicable. So starting with sort of making emails look pretty awesome and sending them out looking awesome. Some cool things with Google Forms that'll really help you if you're doing applications and stuff like that. And then we're going to use some functions on Google Sheets, some that I use all the time, some that'll definitely help you with huge amounts of data, a wide variety of different things. Then we're going to go into a little bit of scripting. So we're going to use Google Apps Script to extend the functionality of Google Sheets and try to send emails from a spreadsheet. And then later we're going to use that script to then go into HTML coding to sort of create a very basic website using the script and using a spreadsheet to make it all happen. So sort of getting harder and harder as the day progresses. So I'm going to sort of go a little bit quickly. This obviously is recorded, as Rohit said, but after sort of every larger section, I will stop, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Obviously, I can't cover a whole lot in an hour, but I can cover just the basics to get you started, to get you knowledgeable about the tools that I use that you can go on in your own time and start experimenting with these tools, seeing how they work, and going beyond what I'm teaching you today. So without further ado, let me share my screen. And we're going to go straight into emails. So here is your email friend. It is called MailChimp. MailChimp is a website. Hold on one sec. Right here. MailChimp is a website where you can go and design the template of an email. And I'll show you after this that you'll be able to go and import that into Gmail and send it as you would a regular email. So the way that it makes emails look different is called HTML. So it's a type of coding that sort of tells you how things look as opposed to just plain text. And so it allows you to add all of these elements over here, whether that be an image, a divider, a big bunch of text. You can obviously change fonts and all of that. And what's really unique and what I use for a lot of my emails is it centers the email too. So you can have one of those emails that looks sort of really professional, like they come out at SAS, where the sort of edges are gone, but there's your email is in a box in the center. And so all of that you can do with MailChimp. And I won't obviously go through how to create all of this on MailChimp. I'll just leave that to you guys to go and set up your account and to just play around with it. But really, it's a wonderful tool to create and design emails the way you want it to look, right? So the example that we're going to use right now is a celebration service email that I used 2 years ago on my own account. And so I put together the template, I uploaded all of the images and put in all the text. And so now what I have to do is, having created this email, I have to go and be able to send that on Gmail. So there's an extension that I use for that called Cloud HQ. So it's called Cloud HQ for Gmail. I encourage you to go and download that from the Google Chrome Web Store. And what that allows you to do is, if you look right here, you can go in here and open up all of your templates here from MailChimp. And then what you can do is you can take those templates and it'll export it to your Gmail drive, basically. And so, for example, here's the one we're using right here. This button right here, you're going to want to copy it to your drafts first, and then use it. So what the functionality of this extension is, it restricts you to only 10 imported templates per month from MailChimp. And so for the vast majority of us, that's not a problem. But what makes that a whole lot easier is, instead of downloading it straight from MailChimp, which is this option right here, which will sort of bring up an email template with whatever you had on MailChimp, I don't encourage that. What I encourage you to do is to copy it to your templates. So that's this little edit button right over here. And so that will automatically copy it over. And so every time you use it, you're not taking it from MailChimp, you're taking it from your own drive. And so it doesn't count against your 10 every time you use it. Great. So now we have in my templates all of these emails that I've copied over the years. The one we just copied was this one right here. And if I want to use it, all that I have to do is press the Use This Template button, and it will create a Gmail draft like this. And it's really, really awesome, because as soon as you send that, it keeps all the formatting that it had in when you were designing it, and you can send it out to whoever using the regular Gmail functionality. Now, what I will say on this part is that I encourage you not to create like an actual full-fledged email in MailChimp, I encourage you to create templates, right? So for example, this celebration of service email, this goes out to 400 or 500 people every year. And so obviously I'm not going to create a single template with each person's name in here every time. What I'm going to do is just put in some sort of template where I can go in Gmail and I can just take this text and edit it as if it was any other email, right? Does that make sense? And so after you've imported from MailChimp, you're still allowed to edit it as if it was any other email. What I will say is that when you do import it, because of all this fancy formatting that MailChimp has applied to it, it sometimes doesn't keep the formatting the way you want it. And so the foolproof way to change elements of your email without messing up your formatting is to edit it in HTML. So as soon as you get the Cloud HQ extension, you'll have this little thing that'll pop up at the bottom of all of your emails. It's built in as well. And that's to edit your draft as an HTML file. And it's going to look really scary. I've never actually formally been taught in HTML, and I know it looks scary. But basically, all of this green stuff that you see, that's telling the code what kind of formatting you want it to look like. And then all of this text in white, that's what's actually showing up. And so if you want to delve deeper into HTML coding, we'll go a little bit later today. But if you're interested in that, you can learn that on your own. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, this white stuff, the white text in the middle, that's what you need to edit to change the text that'll show up in your preview over here. So let's see I want to change some of the text that is down in there. Okay, so I want to change my name. So from Grant to Go Grant Schooling. And as you see, that'll pop up in the preview. And so all of this white text, that's where you can change stuff, right? And it'll show up right there in the draft. And the reason this is foolproof is that the white text is already enclosed in the HTML sort of formatting area. And so all of the HTML text that's in green above here that comes before the white text is telling Gmail how to display the white text, right? How to show it, what font to use, what color, blah, 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 all of that. And so long as you don't change all of the green stuff and you just change all this text in white, then you're just changing the content of your email. Foolproof works every time. Now, when you copy it from Cloud HQ, there's a little thing that's really annoying that shows up at the bottom of your email that's just sort of their watermark, right? So that Cloud HQ can have their little watermark on every one of the emails that they send. But it's actually really easy to remove because now you're editing everything that's basically in this email. And basically what they do is they add all of this content right here. So all of this HTML text contributes to the formatting and text of the little watermark that they add. So if you just delete that, then you can get rid of their watermark, which is just a tip there to make sure your emails are as professional as possible. Okay, so that's in editing an email. And last but not least, in sending your email, there are a couple cool things that you can do to make the sending of it a little bit more professional. So what I use is the ESC email editor. So I put this together at the beginning of the year. And what it basically uses is Google script coding to go and access the drafts that are in your Gmail folder. And you can do a few cool things when you're sending them out. You can't edit the text of the email, but you can edit things. So let me just refresh my drafts here because I should have just created that new one. And so it'll load the draft. Don't worry about the text color. The preview is a little bit off, but it will send appropriately. And the one really cool thing when you're sending it out from the ESC email editor that you cannot do in Gmail is the from name. So this little box right here allows you to change the name of the sender. And let me explain what that will do. So if I send this to myself, here's what it'll come in, right? It'll come in saying it's from Grant Schooling, right? Because that's the default. That's my Gmail name. So right here, it shows up as Grant Schooling. And when I send it to you, the name obviously for you will not be me. It'll be Grant Schooling. But the way you can change that, and I messed up because I used that draft. So let me go ahead and get a new draft. So the way you change that is on the from box in over here on the Gmail or the ESC email editor. And so what you can do is, for example, if you have a club or an organization and you're trying to send out an official email from that club or organization, you can just put in your club name here. And when you go to send this email from this page right here, it'll change that name. So once again, let me send it to myself. and then the send email right here. So email sent, and when it comes in, let us hope that it works correctly. Oh, not that one. This one right here. It changes the name of the sender, which is really cool. So the email that shows up will obviously show up as my email, but the name of the sender is not my name anymore. And so for any official email that you're sending, for any club or organization that you're sending it from, that is your tool right there to make sure that when it comes into people's inbox, it's not this unprofessional email that's coming from some random officers of that organization. It's coming from, it looks like it's coming from the organization itself. Yeah. And then the one last thing that I want to show you guys is on the ESC email editor as well. You can schedule emails in Gmail when you send them out, obviously. And I like to do this for professionality, just to make sure that all of our ESC emails come out at a certain time. They're expected, they're a newsletter. And so it's professional in that regard. But what you can do on the email editor is make that more precise. So sometimes the Gmail code will send it 1 or 2 minutes late, especially if you're sending it to a larger group of people. And so when you go to the ESC email editor, you can go to your scheduling dashboard. And when you send an email, you can schedule it to go a specific time, and it'll actually send at that time to a accuracy within milliseconds. And so it's just an updated way of scheduling an email to be sent at an exact time, as opposed to Gmail's sort of loosely based sending it at a time. So that is everything email related. So I'm going to pause really quickly and take any of your questions on that. I know I ran through that really quickly, and hopefully you'll be able to look back at the recording if you have any other questions, but are there any questions right now?
I could start with one in the sense that MailChimp obviously is an integrated institution which is intended to send campaigns on its own. Is there a reason that you first import to Cloud HQ before using the templates?
Yeah, that's a good question. So MailChimp is a service that email subscribers will use to send it out to a mass email. Costs money. And so we sort of, I cheap MailChimp out by using their template designer to organize and create templates for emails, but it's free when you import it over to Gmail and send it from Gmail as opposed to sending it from MailChimp. So it's the free option, basically. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Renee.
Okay, what happens if you run out of all 10 free templates?
That's a good question, and we did that yesterday. So in the event that you run out of your 10 free templates a month of importing them from MailChimp to Gmail, you can get more free templates from MailChimp by sharing a MailChimp and like convincing other people to get a MailChimp account, or sorry, a Cloud HQ account. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can fess up the money and just pay. But hopefully you're not sending 10 unique sort of templated emails from MailChimp to Cloud HQ through Gmail, right? Hopefully that you're creating templates, importing them to Gmail, and then changing changing the text within the templates as you send them out. So you don't have to deal with that 10 email limit.
And the 10 renews once a month anyways, right?
Correct. Yep.
Grant, will you get further into how to customize each email? So for the sender name, right? When you want to send emails to 200 people, to customize each email. So to customize the text.
Awesome. We're going to do a little bit of basic Gmail coding at the end using Google Apps Script. So yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah. All right, awesome. We ready to move on? All right, cool. This next segment is pretty straightforward. It's how to make your forms really cool and functional. So here's just 2 extensions that I use. You all know that when you type in forms.new, it creates a new form, right? Same with sheets.new and docs.new. It's really cool. Okay, so the 2 extensions that I use are called Form Limiter and Form Ranger. They're from the same company actually. And the form limiter allows a Google form to be closed at a specific time. So say you have an application and you say there's a hard deadline of 11:59 p.m. on this day. Well, I doubt that you're going to be up at 11:59 on that day to actually close the form, and so you could be getting late submissions. So if you want to eliminate the possibility of that, all you have to do is open up Form Limiter, set a limit on this form, and it will automatically close it at the time that you want it to close. So the date and time, right? And you can have it send you an email when it closes, whatever you want. You can also have it close after a number of responses. So for example, if you're having a sign up and it's a sort of first come, first serve type sign up, after say 20 responses, you can have it close the form and no one else will be able to submit. So that's what the form limiter extension does. The second extension I use is called Form Ranger. And this basically allows you to populate multiple choice or checkmark questions on your Google form with stuff from a spreadsheet. And so the cool thing about this is whenever you, like say you have a list of something on your spreadsheet, you can take that list and it'll automatically make each one of those list items a option item on your Google form. So for example, in the ESC, we use it for clubs. So if we add a club to our registry and we add it to the spreadsheet, it'll automatically add it to all of the Google forms in which we ask clubs to input their club name, right? So you can ask it to populate it from a range. You can choose the spreadsheet that it comes from. Generally, that's a Google Sheet. Right here, you just select your Google Drive and Google Sheet, and then it'll import. It'll re-update the data, sort of check to see if there's been any changes to the spreadsheet, any changes to your list. You can have it check either every hour or after someone submits a form. So in case that changes your spreadsheet in any way, you can have it re-update that your Google form, or both. So that's how that helps. So for anything that you need to automatically populate from a spreadsheet, that's what you use. Just a quick note, for adding these add-ons, you just go to these three dots up here on Google Forms and click add-ons, and you can find it here in the Google Web Store for Google Forms. And so this is where you'll find all of your extensions there. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for Google Forms. I told you it was simple. Any questions on that before we move on?
For the spreadsheets, is there any particular configuration that you need to set it to?
So what it'll ask is for a specific column of a spreadsheet. So for example, if you have a list and they all go down one column, it'll take data from that column. And what it'll do is every hour, it'll take that list, put it in as the sort of options on your Google form. And if there's nothing been changed to that spreadsheet, then it won't actually update it. So when you're looking at the responses tab in your Google Forms, it won't show up as separate responses every time it updates it from the list. It'll still be, if it's the same name, it'll be the same response or the same option chosen. Yeah. All right, sweet. Moving on to my favorite, Google Sheets. So obviously, I cannot just teach you all of the functions that Google Sheets has to offer. It's just so cool, so vast, and you really should just go and explore yourself. But what I am going to teach you are some of the powerful ones that I use on a regular basis, especially for dealing with things like a list. And so what I've done here is I've replicated sort of, I guess, what you get from a list of Google form responses, right? So you get a timestamp and an email and then whatever data stuff that come in, right? And we're just going to play around with this data a little bit. So hopefully you all know that to get functions on Google Sheets, that's the equal sign, and then you just type in the function, right? So the first function that I'm going to be teaching you is the if statement. So the if statement is just a very easy logical statement, same encoding, where if some statement is true, then return this. And if it's not true, return something else, right? So the way that's written is if, for example, the cell C2 equals pi, which it is, if I spell it correctly, then comma, if it's correct, what am I going to return? I'm going to return the number 1. And if it's incorrect, I'm going to return the number 0, just for the heck of it. And there you go, right? That's a simple logical statement. If I drag it down, right, for example, it'll check each one of these in the row to see if they equal high, and obviously they don't, right? So that's your simple if statement, and I'll show you in a second how to make that happen for a whole list of them, which can be really cool. That's the first one. Second one is the COUNTIF function. So the COUNTIF function allows you to count the number of cells in a range that equal a certain value, right? So for example, the COUNTIF function goes like this. So it has two components. The first component is the range that you're searching. So I want to search this whole range right here. and then comma, what am I searching it for, right? So the search criteria is I want it to search for if any of those cells are equal to my email. So scrolling 7, and what it should hopefully pop up with. Right, so it counted all of these cells because it knows that they're equal to that one thing, right? And if you happen to miss over this, when you're talking about it equaling sort of a string is what it's called, which is basically text or any combination of text and numbers, that's what's called a string. And you put that in double quotations in Google Sheets. And if you're asking if it's equal to a number, then that's, you just have to type in the number, right? That's not any fancy formatting there. So that's the COUNTIF function. And the other use for the COUNTIF function is for checking for blank cells, right? So if you're checking, for example, how many rows of this actually have data in them and how many are blank, I would just set that to that range, just one column. And then the function for not equals to is this little open alligator, close alligator symbol. And if I want it to search for any cells that are not equal to blank, then I just close that out. Because if you think about what that's doing, it's saying it's not equal to nothing, basically. And so that's what that cell is saying. And so there you go. It's counting all of the ones right here that are not blank, right, that have text in them, and then all of these it didn't count. So that is the COUNTIF function. And again, I'm going to show you in a little bit how that works. Now, just an aside right now, if you're ever confused and you're trying to write down what goes into sort of each specific, like what components go into the function, Google Sheets has a complete documentation for all of this that is really, really helpful. So it's called the Google Sheets Doc Editor Help. It can help you with any sort of functionality you're trying to do for any Google product in G Suite. And so for Sheets, it has a list of all of the functions that you could use. And for example, if we if we type in COUNTIF, for example, it'll tell you what has to go into that function to make it work, right? So the range that we're searching, and the criteria, which is an equals or is not equals, and then a value. Another thing that is coming in handy when you use the COUNTIF, if it's equal to a cell, right? So let me see. Let's count if this range, and we want to see if it's equal to this cell right here, cell B2, right, which is my email address. So the way you do that is obviously you can't put in B2 right there because then it'll be searching for the literally B2. And so what you have to do is the and symbol, and then you can type in your cell reference. And so what that'll do is that little and symbol, it basically pushes a bunch of strings together. So when you have the and symbol in any one of your formulas, it's taking whatever is in that cell and it's smushing it together with the string of the equal sign. And so essentially what it's saying is it's equal to my email address, going 77047, because it makes that all one string. And that's what it's searching for. So that's how you use it in conjunction with a cell reference. And again, we'll come back to COUNTIF later. Now, another really powerful one is the VLOOKUP function. So just for starters, I'm going to copy this data right over here. And what the VLOOKUP function allows you to do is it allows you to say, okay, I'm in this cell G2, right? And I'm right next to the cell F2 with this date value in it. I want to look for that specific date value in this entire range, right? Going down the list. And if any one of the values in the first column of the range I give it is equal to this one in F2, which we obviously know is going to be A2, I can tell it to return any of the other values. So here's just an example. So if I go VLOOKUP, what am I looking up? So I'm looking up this value right here. Where am I looking for it? I'm looking for it in this range. And what do I want it to return? I want it to return the 1, 2, let's say I want it to return the third column. So that's a 3. And then the last thing in here is you have to put true or false. So you put true if the range is sorted and false if you want it to match exactly. So I always use false because I want it to match exactly. The only reason that you would use true right here is if it was sorted. So if you had a list that was sort of in alphabetical order and you wanted to, you didn't have an exact match, but you wanted to say the closest alphabetical match to the word hi, for example, then you could have it search for that. But I never use that. I always use false. So that's what goes in at the end there. And if we search again in our Google Sheets docs editor help, we can see here that that's what we put in, right? So the search key, what are we searching for? The range in which we're searching for it, and keep in mind with the VLOOKUP function especially, is always going to look in the first column. The index, so that's the column that it wants you to return of a range, right? So if we have 4 columns in a range like we do here, and I'm searching for the first, I'm searching in the first column for this value right here, and I want it to return the third column, then that's what the 3 represents, and then false is obviously if or if not, it's sorted. So if you think about how awesome this function is, it really has a wide range of functionality. So you can take any value that you have and try to search for a corresponding value in another range. And so a lot of the ways that we use this in the ESC is if we have a list of emails, right? If we have a list of emails, say for the service portal, and we're wanting to find their first name or something from our database of the service portal, we can go in and say, search this huge range on the service portal for their email, and then return the second column, which has their name in it. And so that's really useful for how it's used. And that's the VLOOKUP function. All right, import range function. So if you have a number of like separate documents, separate Google Sheets in your drive, and you want to pull data from one to the other and search it and whatever, you use the import range function. Yeah, import range function. So usually you're going to use 2 different spreadsheets to do this, but I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use the same spreadsheet, which it'll show you how to do it, but it won't be quite as cool. So the import range function, let me spell that out, allows you to take the URL of one spreadsheet. So for example, I'm going to take the URL of this spreadsheet right here. And so in a normal circumstance, it would go and find that spreadsheet in your Google Drive. And then I'm going to tell it the range inside that spreadsheet where it's going to pull things from. So I know that range in this spreadsheet is the name of the sheet. So sheet 1, right? Because I'm pulling it from down here. Sheet 1, exclamation mark. That's just the formatting that they ask you that you put. So you put the name of the sheet, exclamation mark, and then the cell reference. So the cell reference here would be, let's just say A2, right? I'm going to do a single cell for now. Actually, no, I'm going to make it the entire column. So A to A, and that tells you the column. So what is, oh, I didn't spell it right. There you go. So import range. So what it's going to do is first, it should ask me for permission, obviously, because I have to allow these spreadsheets to access each other within my Google Drive. And now what it's doing and what it's done, which is super cool, is it's gone to this spreadsheet somewhere in my Google Drive, pulled out the data that I told it to pull, sort of in that specific range, and brought it straight to the spreadsheet. And so this is really cool if you have a bunch of different spreadsheets. Obviously, I didn't use it for different spreadsheets today, but that's what the import range function can do. And it's really, really cool because what it essentially outputs is a range. So it'll, like for example, you see it outputted 9 different cells. And so in a minute, when we look at array formulas, you can have some sort of function apply to each of those cells, and that'll make more sense in a second. Okay, so those are the basic formulas that sort of I use on a daily basis. Obviously, if you look at this list over here of all the different functions that Google Sheets has, there are tons more. And in all honesty, for whatever purpose you're setting up your Google Sheet and you want to have a bunch of functionality, you're going to need more than just those 4 formulas that I just taught you. But really what you just have to do is get in there and search for functions. So what I do, or what I did when I was learning how to use all of these functions, right? I didn't take class or anything. I sort of just dove in head first, is whenever I needed to figure out how to do something, or say, do an if statement or do conditional formatting, I would just Google it. And there are sort of Google help groups on there that are run by Google for every kind of problem that you want to run. So for example, hey, I'm trying to figure out how I can pull a column from one spreadsheet and match it with a column of another spreadsheet. Just type that into Google. There are tons of people online that will be able to help you find the right function in Google Sheets to be able to work that, right? So my best advice is just don't be afraid to go out there and look for the right function to make it work. And don't also be afraid to match functions together, right? So if I could give just a really quick example of what that might look like. Let's see. So let's put together an if statement and a VLOOKUP function, right? So we know that VLOOKUP I can VLOOKUP this value in this range, return the third column, and no, it's not sorted. Well, it is, but let's say it's not. And that returns high, right? So now I can do an if statement around that. So I can do equals if that entire VLOOKUP function, what that VLOOKUP function returns, equals high, which we know it should be, right? Then you can turn 1 or 0. And obviously it doesn't have to be 1 or 0. Actually, for demonstration purposes, let me make that yes and no. So see, what's happened here is we've used an if statement around a VLOOKUP. So we're telling it that if the VLOOKUP of this value in this range returns what we think it's going to return, then it'll say yes. And if it doesn't return what we think it's going to return, it'll return no. Another sort of function in a function that I'll just say is, let's replace yes with the VLOOKUP itself. So if the VLOOKUP equals high, then it'll just return the VLOOKUP. And if it doesn't equal high, then it'll return no. And so obviously what you see here is it returns high. But what if we make this high exclamation mark? Obviously it's not that. And so it's not going to return the VLOOKUP function. It's going to return no, right? The second value in our if statement. And so I've had functions that have gone on for paragraphs and paragraphs that are just functions within functions within functions, with a lot of copy and paste involved. And so really you can go on for, I think it's about 50,000 characters they allow you to put in one single cell of a Google Sheets function formula. And so you can go on forever. You can sort of bundle functions however you need them to make the formula work the way you want it. And now I'm going to teach you the most powerful function of all on Google Sheets, which is called array formula. And an array formula, well, first of all, a bit of vocabulary. An array is a set of data, right? An array is a group of multiple cells, not just one cell. And so an array formula allows you to take one formula in one cell, and you can tell it to apply it to an entire list of cells. So let me just make that happen. So let us see here. Let's do a VLOOKUP function. So I'm just going to write this out before I do the array formula. So VLOOKUP, oh, whoops, I don't have anything to VLOOKUP. I'll put something there. That cell in that range, return the third row, false. You've seen me do that 100 times. So when we put this here, for this single row, it's looking for that function right there. It's looking in this range, and it's returning the third column. But what if I wanted to apply this VLOOKUP to this entire column? Well, I have two options. I could drag down. And I need to just put a $sign in there so that makes sense. Oh, right. There you go. So I've essentially applied a VLOOKUP function to the entire column, and I did that by dragging down. The alternative to dragging down is the array formula. So let me get rid of those. And in this very first cell up here at the top, I can just surround this with the words array formula. And then obviously I'm no longer searching just E2, I'm searching from E2 to E. And I want it to keep that A2 to D, we can keep that fine. And there you go. It has applied that single VLOOKUP function to every single row in the spreadsheet. And it has applied it unique to each row, right? So I'm telling it to not VLOOKUP the same cell every time it does another row. I'm telling it to look up a specific column in every row for every row that it does. And so the array formula is so, so powerful because it means that you can take a list of thousands of data points and apply a single formula to it to spit out another data point. And it's all in a single cell right up here at the top, right? All of these cells down here, they don't have a formula in them, right? They just have a text value because this one formula here at the top has made all of that happen. And so really, you're gonna have to go out and find the functionality of the array formula function yourself because it's just so, it's so endless, really. And so for any list you have, for anything that you're trying to apply something to, and you don't want to drag down, and you don't want to have to deal with all of that, the array formula is really your friend. And again, your ultimate friend in all of this is the Google Docs help. So finding out what exactly goes into each function, right? And for array formula, for example, you can get a full sort of page length doc listing what can go into it, what will come out of it, what type of things it'll sort of spit out, what type of things that you have to sort of format things to go in, and then it'll list similar functions as well. So all of these are so helpful. Really check out the Docs Editor Help website by Google for anything that you're doing on Google Sheets. Just really quickly before we finish up on spreadsheets, there are two other things that I think are really useful when you're sort of doing your management via spreadsheets. One is the checkbox function. So you can go ahead and insert a checkbox. And in a text, if you see up here, the value of this cell isn't actually like a text box, it's true or false. So if I check it, it'll change it to true, false, and I can, for example, I can add an if statement to this. Oh, it has to be, that's a Boolean statement, so it's not a string. So there you true, false, right? And so the checkbox is really cool when you're sort of interfacing with your Google Sheet a lot and you're going to be going through and doing sort of a checklist type thing, then the checkbox is really helpful. And the second thing that I find really useful is data validation. And so that allows you to do a drop down in a cell. And so let me see where you find it. Right here. So in data validation, you can tell it that this cell right here that we're highlighting, so G2, is only allowed to have a set number of things that can be in it, right? A set number of words, a set number of values, and it can't be anything else. So, for example, we can say it has to be a number. And then, if we say it's a number between 10 and 100, I have to type that in. Then, if I try to type in a word, it tells me that's wrong, right? And there's a way that you can set data validation such that it will act like just flat out reject it instead of showing you a warning. And so if I try to type in a word, it won't take it, right? It has to be a number. Try that one more time. Because it has to be between 10 and 100. There you go, right? So there you go. That's data validation. But what's even more cool is that you can set data validation to be a list of things, right? So say I want it to only have values from that range that we have over there. So I'm going to select list from a range. If it makes it any easier, I can just drag down right here. And the show drop-down list and cell, that's going to be really cool. I'll show you in a sec. And range, whatever it is that you want. And you see it added this little arrow. Now you can select from any list of things, right, that we told it to select from, to put in that cell. And that is super helpful, right? If you're going through a list and you're assigning sort of a value to each one, and it's coming from a certain range of values, there are just endless applications to this. And it'll automatically update that list when you update your spreadsheet. So for example, now that's been replaced with the word updated, right? And so that dropdown will constantly be updated with whatever range you're telling it to do. And it's super cool. So yeah, that's the extent of the spreadsheet stuff that I'm going to teach you today. Let's go into questions. That was a lot of information. Any questions from you guys? Shell-shocked? Yeah. So yeah, the basic advice that I can give you is just go out and explore. No one person can teach you to use Google Sheets to the full extent of Google Sheets. It's just awesome in every respect. And so for whatever you need it to do, you can find a way to make it do what you want to do. And if there's not a function to do that, brilliant segue, you can do it with script. So I'm now going to teach you sort of basic JavaScript language in Google Apps Script. So that's the built-in Google script editor for spreadsheets, or for any Google product actually. So here's what you can do. So on any Google document, on a Google Doc, on a Google form, and especially on Google Sheets, where it's most useful to me at least, you can go to Tools and Script Editor. And what that'll do is it'll create a script project, right? This script doc, and this is all CS that we're getting into now, that is specifically linked to that spreadsheet. And let me explain what linked to a spreadsheet means. It means that well, first of all, with Google Apps Script, you now have access to all of the Google products in a script form. So you can go and create a Google Calendar event using script. You can go and open up a Google Doc and add a word to it using Google Script. You can copy a Google Drive file using Google Script. You can change the values in the spreadsheet using Google Script. It's incredible. And it's all built in and it's all free. So the way that you access each of these sort of functionalities are what are called classes. And that's sort of computer science vocabulary that's not incredibly useful. But what it means is that you can type in some word that'll tell it that you're trying to work with spreadsheets. So for example, that spreadsheet app for when we're specifically using Google Sheets. And now we have all of these options with what we want to do with that Google Sheet. So I want it to link to the Google Sheet that I just created. So that would be get active. So now as you see, it opened up that spreadsheet, and now everything after that is referring to that spreadsheet in this code. And just disclaimer, guys, I've never taken a computer science course, so I'm probably not the best teacher of this, but basically you can go out and explore yourself, and you can just make it happen, whatever you want to happen. Yeah, so now we're talking about a spreadsheet. I want to get that range, get a range and pull this data and manipulate it with my code, right? So I'm talking about a spreadsheet. I've opened up that spreadsheet. I have to narrow it down a little bit more to a sheet itself. So get sheet by name. Here I'm going to put in a sheet. It's called, oh, that's not what I meant to do. Here, sheet 1, because that's what we call our sheet, right? So now we're referencing the sheet. And now I want to reference a range within that sheet. And so that's what's called get range. And the easiest way to do it is by just putting in a string. So let's say I want to pull A1 to D, right? So that's getting four columns and whatever, 1,000 rows, however long the spreadsheet is. So now I'm referring to a range, and to get the values, all I have to do is get values. Whoop. There. Okay, let's recap what we just did. So what I've essentially done is in this code, I have told it that I want it to go into a Google Sheet. I told it what sheet I want it to go into, which is the linked sheet, right? Because the script and this spreadsheet are linked because I got to it from script editor. And so this script is unique to that spreadsheet. I told it to go to this one unique sheet within that spreadsheet. And then I told it to go to the range within that sheet, within that spreadsheet. And then of that range, I wanted it to get the values. So get the values means get what is in every single cell and put it into an array. And let me show you really quickly what an array looks like. Logger.log, by the way, is just a way for you to see what it is that you just pulled out. So let me create a variable using this. So just basic sort of coding languages, you're setting a variable, you're telling it what to call the variable, and you're telling it that whenever I get whatever values I get from the spreadsheet, what I just explained, getting all of that values, I'm going to say that those values are named this variable named data. And so I'm going to log that variable data over here. So here's what's going to happen. I do have to give it permission to access my spreadsheet. So allow me to do that really quickly. Giving it permissions. All right, here we go. So it's gotten the permissions. Let's run the function. And in view logs, which I'll show you in a sec, we can see what it actually got. So view logs, when I did my logger.log, this is where it goes. Here's what it outputs. So you see these little brackets here? That's the mark of what is called an array. And so an array is the best way I can explain it is just a list of data in which you have rows and columns, basically what a spreadsheet is, except in coding language. And so what you can see as outputted is in the first row, right? The first open bracket, I have the timestamp, email, data 1, data 2, close bracket. That's the first row, right? That's what I told it to get, and that's what's coming from the spreadsheet. Second row, I have the date, the email, and the 2 words, hi and bye, right? And you see it's pulled that from the second row of the spreadsheet, which is super cool. So if you think about what we've done here, we've taken data from a Google Sheet and we're now able to manipulate it inside code, which is incredible if you think about the extent to which you can use code, right? So I'm just going to do a few sort of basic commands with you here, showing you what you can do with this code and going through this data. It's going to involve a little bit of computer science. Okay, so first and foremost, I want it to run through each row of the data that I've pulled, and I want to see if it's not blank. Let's do that. So the way I do that is I'm going to tell it to, for every row, so the way you say that is for variable r, so that's just variable r as in that's going to increase every time we go down. Let's say we'll start at row 0. We'll tell it that we'll continue going through this list. We'll continue looping this for as long as r is less than however long our data is. So that's data.length. So however number of rows that is. And then r++ just tells it when you finish going through this loop, go back, increase r, and run it again. So in basic terms, it's going through every row of our data, and it's checking each row for whatever we want it to check with, right? So let me just close out that. And inside the brackets for our for loop, let's say we're going to check to see if the first column isn't blank. Okay, so if statement. And it's actually very similar to the if statement in the spreadsheet that I talked about earlier. So if, let's see, data r, that means that sort of notation right there means that I'm referring to the first row in our data, or whatever row it is that we're on. So if r equals 0, it'll search for the 0th row. If r equals 1, it'll search for the first row, stuff like that. If data r, and then the first column. So column is the second sort of criteria that you add to it. Columns, we have columns 0 through 4 right now. And that actually is a good note. So right here, we see we have row 1 through 9 on the spreadsheet. When you take it in code, it'll be, the data points will be data 0 through 8. And that's just the way computer science works. The first value in a data set is always going to be 0. That's just no getting around that. So, okay, so what we're referring to right here, if data are 0, so if the row, if in the 0th row in the 0th column, i.e. this one right here, if that is equal to, let's just say timestamp, right? Then what do I want it to do? I want it to log something, right? I want it to log yes. How's that? So that'll show up in our log, and that'll just happen. So if we run this, what it's going to do is it's going to pull the data from the spreadsheet. It's going to go through every single row of that data. And for each row of that data, if the value in the first column is equal to the word timestamp, it's going to log it. So let's see how many times it logged it. It should be only once. Yeah, perfect. There we go. So it logged it with because it only showed up once, because timestamp only showed up once. Now, let's check the second column for every time it shows up in my email, right? And we should be able to count how many times that is. So it's not the 0th column anymore we're working with, it's the first column, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yep, second column, and if it's equal to my email. Okay, so if in every row the second column is equal to my email, then it will log something. And actually, I'm going to customize what that log says. So I'm going to say, yes, found at row. And then the way you do sort of joining things in script is you do a plus symbol and plus the value of r. So if we think about what r is whatever row it's looking at. And so it should be able to tell me in what rows it found my email in. Okay, so let's save that. Let's run that. And let's see what it logged out. So in the log. Oh God, let's see here. Give it a second. It's going through the data servers right now. Okay, perfect. So it just ran through every single row of my 1,000 row spreadsheet and told me that my email is in row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which we know it corresponds over here to rows 2 through 9, right? Because the code is one step off of that. So that's just how you run through that. And now we've shown you how to pull data from a spreadsheet, right, with this get values. Now I'm going to show you how to edit data in a spreadsheet. So instead of logging it when I find my email, I want to add something to my spreadsheet. So for every time that it finds my email in the second column of that row, I'm going to tell it to, let's add something in the fifth column. Let's do that. So the way we do that is the same start over here, right? Spreadsheet app.getActive get sheet by name, get sheet by name, because I want it to do something in this sheet. And then instead of get range, we're going to do set range. Or sorry, no, I lie. We have to get the range first, and then we have to set the range. So for this one, we aren't able to use the just string value of telling it what cell to do because it's changing every time. So I'm going to use the row column method of doing that. So the way we do that is I want it to do the row r+1, because remember it's going down the rows with r representing that row. And remember that the script value is always the way that script data works is it's always one less than the spreadsheet. So we do r+1 column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's fifth column, and set value. So that's the function for telling it to do something in there, right? And so let's set the value. This is row. Okay, or this is, yeah. Data point r+1. Okay, cool. So now it's going to set that value. Now I'm just going to add a little thing at the beginning, which will tell it to not start the script for a few milliseconds. And that way I can show you and you can see it happening as it happens. So I'm going to tell it to wait 2,000 milliseconds before it starts. All right, now when I run it, I can go over to my spreadsheet and I can watch the magic happen, hopefully. Ah, there it goes. And that's so cool. So we told it to go through every single row of my spreadsheet, and for every row of the spreadsheet that it found my email in the second column, it added something to this column over here. It is brilliant. It's really, really cool. And so there's just endless sort of opportunities for you to go in and edit data with scripts like this. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to sort of manipulate data, right? So let's say it's going to run through the data set, and I want it to see if this column right here, if the value in the third column contains the letter H. I'm going to see if it contains the letter capital H, just for the heck of it. So the way we do that is, okay, so it's looking for this data point right here. I'm going to surround this in just a string, just be careful. And so what that does is, in case it's a number or a value, which these things over here are, these are in the format of a date, it'll just turn those into strings, which is helpful for us because we're going to do an index function. So an index means it's looking inside this string for a certain character, a certain value, a certain string of characters, whatever else you want it to do. So that's called index of, let's say, the capital letter H. So what index of will do is if it finds the letter H, it will return the position of the letter H in the string that I've given it. So if H is the second letter, it will return the letter, the number 1, right? Because we go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 0 is the first one, then it'll return the letter 2, or sorry, the number 2. If H is the...
Sorry, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
So theoretically, we're supposed to end at 5. This is obviously fascinating.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, can I suggest that you very quickly cover some sort of the mail merge and sending mass emails, which I imagine a fair number of people are here for, and then we will continue on, and those of you who are well in over your heads can head out, and the hardier ones of you can stay on as Grant goes deep into the functionality of Google Script.
Sure, absolutely. So actually, this is really helpful because this leads really well into sending emails from a spreadsheet. So let's just finish this up really quick. If the index of is greater than 0, i.e. if it's there, then we want it to do something, right? So I'm going to abandon that really quickly and run into a send emails function. So we're going to do essentially the same thing, right? So we're going to get this list of data, and let's say that I want to send emails to each of these people. Imagine that you have a different list of people other than the same email address. And I want this right here to be the subject of the email, and I want this right here to be the body of the email. So here's how you do that. So we're obviously going to have to use our data again, right? So we're getting the data function that we were doing before. And we're going to do our for statement again. So our for loop, so for every row, right? Just copying what was there before. Okay, now, in every row, I want it to send an email if it's not blank. So, right, we're going to have to just run an if statement really quickly. So if, our 0 is not equal to blank. Okay, so that's just making sure that I don't try to tell it to send emails from these rows because that'd be useless. I'd have a bunch of error messages. Okay, so here we are. So now we're at every row and we're trying to send email from every row. Here's the way you do that. It's called Gmail app. So the same way we used spreadsheet app, we can use Gmail app. And if you see the autocomplete here, you can see all of the things that you can do with Gmail app. You can get all of your drafts, you can get certain threads, you can get certain labels, you can create a draft, or you can, what we're gonna do right now, which is send email. Okay, so the very simplistic form of that is recipient, subject, body. Okay, now I know that my recipient, which is an email address, by the way, is in my second column. And so I know the way that I do that is data, right, R for the row, and second column, which is represented by the number 1, which is confusing, I know. But remember, it's in coding, we start at the letter, at the number 0. So data R1, that is who we're sending it to. The subject is in our third column. Okay, subject third column. So that would be data R2. And our body, we want to be in the fourth column, data R3. Oh, 3. Okay, there you go. And we've now created a for loop that has taken all the values of our spreadsheet, that is searching each one to see if it's blank. If it's not blank, then it's going to send an email given the parameters that I set here. And actually, I don't want it to run into an error trying to send an email to the first one because the word email is not an email address. So I'm going to tell it to start not at the value 0, but at the value 1. So basically what you need to know to send a bunch of emails is just this Gmail app function, right? And so what that's going to do is, if I run it, and obviously I'm going to have to give it permissions again, so give me a second to do that. I'm going to give it permission to send emails from me to myself, fortunately. What that'll do is it'll just send the emails one by one. And you're going to see how cool this is, because when you're sending it from a spreadsheet, there's really sort of no end to how many you can send. Okay. It's telling me it's running, but it usually doesn't run the one time after you, oh, nope, I lie, it sent it. Okay, so I'm gonna go into my inbox. Now I should have, there you go. I have 8 emails, right? Each with a different subject, each with a different body, which is so, so cool. So here's the subject, hi, bye. And if we look, here's where that came from, which is so cool. And so at the very bare bones of it, that's how you send emails from a spreadsheet, right? You just get the data, you go through each data point, and you do data Gmail app.send email. But there are a lot of extra things that you can do with this to make your emails more more professional. So one way of doing that is just by adding the option here. So if I do the other option for send email, Gmail app.send email, obviously we still have our recipient, subject, body, but these options here, those are what you're going to be able to add like an attachment to. You're going to be able to set the name. You're going to be able to set the reply to, all of that fancy stuff that we did with the ESC email editor, and more importantly, the HTML body. So let me show you the documentation for that really quickly. Here. So the AppScript coding documentation, this is where you can find all of the things that you can do with the script, basically. And so I'm just going to scroll down really quickly so you can see all of the things that you can do with the object options. So the options are all of these things. So an attachment, you can attach sort of files from Google Drive. BCC, you can add people to BCC, so not just recipients, but that. CC from, so that's the name of who it's coming from. So if you see what happened right here, it's kind of inconvenient. It just set my email as the person who it's coming from, not actually my name. So if you want to set the name, that's where you do that. The HTML body, that's going to be really powerful. I'll show you that in a sec. Inline images, I've never used that, but if you want to put images inside the email, name, oh, I lie. Name is where you put your name. From is where you put, if you're sending it from a different email account with aliases, you'll never have to use that. Reply to and no reply, which is actually cool. No reply sends it from a different email at SAS, which is no reply at sas.edu.sg. So that's kind of cool if you ever need to use that. But so those are the things you can do with it. What we're going to do with it right now is HTML body. So remember before when we were editing those custom emails from MailChimp as an HTML email? Well, that's what allows it to be customized email beyond just words, right? So this is just a Word email. What we wanted to send is more fancy custom email. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a draft really quickly in Gmail. Remember using Cloud HQ like we did before. So I'm going to create this draft. Take note of the subject. So it's called COS final email. And over here in my script, I'm going to use another function of Gmail app. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to find that draft. We're going to take all of this fancy formatting, which is an HTML format from this draft, and we're going to put it into this email, but we're going to change something with it. So that's Gmail app again. We're going to find the draft. So let's see, get drafts. Oh crud, I have to do it by its ID. So that's highly inconvenient. But what we essentially have done here is we've created a list of all of the drafts in email, and right now it is one. But in the event that you have more than one draft, I'll just show you how to pull out that one draft. So at the end, what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull out the HTML content of this one draft, right? That's what we're trying to do. So I'm just going to run another loop again. So it's going to run through all of my drafts, right? And it's going to see which one has the right subject that I'm looking for. If drafts. Hi, right? So the first draft, or whatever draft that we're talking about, dot get message and then get subject. That's how you pull the subject out of it. Equals, oh, not 3 equals. There. So for whatever draft has that subject, I am going to set the variable HTML body to be the HTML body of this draft. So that would be this draft, right? Drafts, sorry. I.getMessage, so the message of it, and then from the message getting the HTML body. So that is not get plain body, but get body right there. Okay. So we're getting the body, which in script terms is the HTML content that makes up that email. Let's see, I coded that correctly. Yep, okay, perfect. So now when we go into our recipient, the same way we did it before, right? With our data R, the first column, and subject being, say, data R, second column, and our body being data R, third column. The options, here's where we put in the HTML body, right? So HTML body, just open colon, and then this variable right here, which we have represented the HTML body of that draft with, of that. So here's what it's going to do. It's going to find that draft in my drafts. It's going to get the HTML body from it, so all of that fancy formatting content, and then it's going to send an email to this email address with this subject. When I tell it to set the content of the email to be this letter by right there, that'll only actually show up for those phones and rare devices that can't display an HTML content. So usually your actual content will be something like view this in your browser so you can see the full HTML content, but that you don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to run that, and it will take a lot longer now because it's having to find a draft in my email for everyone and pull sort of content from that draft. And let's check my inbox. Okay. So I got the subject right, and here we are. I got the content right. So copy the content over, and it sent that. But one last thing that you're going to want to change. See how I put in replace with name here? When you're sending it to a bunch of people, that's when you're sort of want to customize each individual email. So let's say that the name is whatever name you set it to be, right? And you see these are all different names. And so I'm going to tell it to, I'm going to need that. I'm going to tell it to replace something in that HTML content with the value in the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to say HTML body. So that's the HTML content, right, that we pulled from the draft. We're going to say replace, and that's just a common function of JavaScript. And we're going to replace the string, replace with name, right? Because remember, that's what I put in here, right? Replace with name. So it's going to find that inside the draft every time, and it's going to replace it with the fifth column in my data. Oop, keep doing that wrong. Okay. And I never know if this works correctly or not, but there you go. So there we go. So it's changing the HTML content to replace it with whatever we're telling it to replace it with. So when we run this function, what it should be doing is sending emails to these people, sending it with this subject, and replacing the sort of the first line with this. All right, let's see what we've got. There we go. We did it, guys. So now we have this customized email with all this fancy HTML formatting specifically addressed to me, or the 7th version of me. So that's probably where I can stop when it comes to replacing and sending out all of these custom emails with Google Apps Script. And again, there are tons of like video tutorials if you want to find those on YouTube. If you want to rewatch this video to figure out what exactly was going on, that's fine too. But yes, go forth and send a bunch of emails and make Mr. Welsh mad that so many emails are coming through the SASG suite in so short a time. I often wonder if he's looking at the data for sas.edu.sg and just getting confused at why hundreds of emails are going out in a matter of seconds. But there you have it. That's how you send emails. Any questions?
I was wondering if there's so many different like types of code, like the HTML body. For that, did you like memorize those things, or do you have a specific tips and tricks to kind of know how to use what and when to use it?
So let me screen share one more time. Autocomplete is your best friend when it comes to Google Script, right? Because for everything that you do, right, if I just type Gmail app, it can show me everything that Gmail app will do, right? And you see this little word here at the end, that's what it's coming out with. So if I want it to return a draft, right, I can do create draft, and now I'm returning a draft, and now I can see all the things that I can do with drafts, right? I can delete a draft, I can get the ID, I can get the message, I can send the draft, I can update the draft with the subject and whatever. So if I get the message, for example, this is where I can forward the message, I can get the attachments, I can get who it was BCC to, who the name of the sender was, all of this cool stuff. So in answer to your question, Carolina, yes, offhand, after doing it so many times, I do know some of the shortcuts, but autocomplete is going to be your friend when you're working with Google Apps Script, especially when you're working with this built-in APIs for like Gmail app, spreadsheet app, Forms app, Drive app, whatever it is that you're using, right? And so autocomplete is your friend. And sometimes I just have fun exploring, right? So if I say to myself, hey, I'm going to use Gmail app, I'm going to pull up a draft. What kind of cool things can I do with the draft, right? And I just look through the list of things and just have fun, experiment with them. And that's how you learn. So yeah. Any other questions? Is there any other clarification that you guys need on mass emails like that? Okay, okay. Perfect. So the other stuff that I was going to cover today, Rohit, and you can let me know if you still want me to, is sort of adding rows to a spreadsheet, making copies of documents in Google Drive, and just a basic intro to HTML and how to create websites using Google Script.
So actually what we'll do, let me do my closing. We can let most people leave, I assume, to, grasp this information. And then even if it's just me, we'll stay on and let you complete your lesson for the benefit of future generations and perhaps maybe people who, maybe once they've grasped all the information you've gotten so far, they'll come back for the grand finale, right? So I will do my closing. Thank you everyone for coming today and witnessing the first edition of SAS Masterclass. And I really do hope that even those of you who were initially overwhelmed will go back and review the video and master all of these skills, because this is perhaps the most educational lecture you've had in your 4 years of SAS. And I'm really not exaggerating, like these are real life skills. So thank you all for coming. Also, SAS Masterclass, the trademark, which I just created. As a graduating senior, it's for sale. Do let me know if you want to be the next host of SAS Masterclass, right? It's a valuable franchise. So anyone who wants to stay on and learn about HTML coding, copying Google Documents, etc., please feel free to. Those of you who have more pressing concerns, feel free to do that also. But I will let Grant continue with his incredible saga.
Thank you, Rohit. Okay, so let's just do one final thing with spreadsheets. Let me get back to sharing my screen. And this function you'll probably use all the time, and that's the append row function. So remember we did up here the we're looking through this first column over here to see if it contains the letter H, and I realize now that that's looking for the wrong column. We're going to need column 3. Okay, it's looking for the letter H, and if it has the letter H, it's going to do something, right? So all right, perfect. What are we going to do? Why don't we add whatever row that has the letter H in it in this column? Why don't we add it over here? So append row, and by the way, this is what Google Forms does whenever it gets a new submission, is it appends row. And so what it does is spreadsheet app dot. I'm going to have to get active and do all of this crud again. Get active and get sheet by name, and we're getting the second sheet this time, remember? So we're trying to reference it to the second sheet, and then we're just going to add a row. And so the function name is called append row, and what that's basically doing is you're giving it a one row array of data, and it'll just add a row to your spreadsheet like that. And that's actually really cool. If there's a blank row at the bottom of your spreadsheet, then it won't actually physically add an 1,001st row to your spreadsheet. It'll just put that in the first row. But if every single row of your 1,000 row spreadsheet has the data in it, it'll add an 1,001st row. And so that's the beauty of append rows. You don't have to worry about not having space or having too much space. It'll count that for you. So row contents, what are we going to put in this row? Let's just put the whole data row from what we got before, right? So that entire row from what we pulled from the first spreadsheet, let's append it over on the second spreadsheet, right? So when I run this, let's see what we've got here. And hopefully this will look cool. It might not, but hopefully it does. Let's see. Oh, no, I told us to run the wrong function. I just sent myself 8 more emails. Whoops. Okay, let's run the right function this time. Here we go. And any error messages? Nope, not yet. Uh-oh, something's gone wrong. Uh-oh, okay. Get sheet by name, sheet 2, connective. H is greater than, oh, I was wrong, it's -1. So that's the index function to make sure that it actually is there. Because if it's not there, it'll be return a value 0 or less. So here we go. It added those 3 rows to the spreadsheet. that came over from the first row. And I actually like watching it do this because it's fun. So let me just play it one more time because it's just so cool to me. Wait for it. There we go. Isn't that so cool? Like, can you imagine running a script with thousands and thousands of rows and just watching your script pump out row after row of data into your spreadsheet? It's just so cool to me. So there you go. That's your sort of editing spreadsheet function. That's how you can sort of manipulate this data, put this data somewhere else, and make spreadsheets happen. Whew. Now, that's the spreadsheet app sort of functionality. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you really quickly what the Drive app can do. So obviously there are sort of tons of functionality to this Google Script API, right? You have access to Google Calendar, Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, whatever it is you want. But right now, what you can do on Google Drive is you can open a file or a folder by ID. You can pull out the different files that are in there. You can get the content of those files and stuff like that. So what I'm going to teach you just really quickly is how to sort of create a bunch of documents based on what you have in a spreadsheet. So Drive app dot, hold on, let me back up one second. Let's get our data again. And what we're going to do is for every value of that data, remember we've done this 100 times now, actually one. So for every row in that spreadsheet, I want it to create a Google Doc, and I want it to create a Google Doc that has, let's say, that has this value in it, right? And I want it to put that value into my doc. And so I'm going to have a doc with just one word, basically. So I'm going to have to go to Drive app. And I believe it's create file. Okay. Whew. Oh, no, I lie. It's not Drive app. So Drive app will allow you to get files within folders. And so that's good for PDFs and stuff like that. But we want document app because we're creating a Google Doc. Document app dot create. So here we go. And I'm just going to set a variable to make sure that we create that, right? So let's set the name of the doc to be this first column right here. So, or rather the third column. So that would be data R2, right? Keep doing that wrong. Okay, perfect. So now we have a doc. It's created it. It's in my general drive, right? Now I want to move it to a specific folder. So what I can do is I can get the doc. I believe I can move it. Let's see here. Obviously, I rely heavily on autocomplete, as you can see. Okay, so it doesn't look like you can move it directly from the document app functionality, but what we can do is we can get the ID of this document and then use the Drive app functionality to move it to a folder, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get, there it is, get ID. So that's the ID of a document. Every Google Doc has it. Every Google Slides has it, and Sheets and whatever. Let me just set a variable name to that. I didn't spell that right at all. Okay. Okay, so now we have the ID, and now I can get that file sort of through the backwards end by going through Drive app .get file by ID. There we go. So now I've sort of opened that file, and actually I don't need another row. I can move it wherever I want. So I can, let's see what I can do here. I can make a copy. I can set the sharing permissions. I can add an editor. I'm going to have to get a folder, actually. So bear with me really quickly. So get folder by ID. And then let's do name. And then inside this folder, I can add a file, right? Oh, I'm going to need a specific folder. Bear with me, folks. Get folder by ID. Okay, so I'm going to put in some random folder ID. I'll get that later. Okay, whew. Now I can, I should be able to get some sort of file and add it to that folder. So let me see really quickly. get file by ID and here it is. So when you make a copy, that's when you can choose the folder destination. Okay, so it wasn't my bad. You can't create it and and choose the folder, but you can later. So this is where we're going to get the folder, right? So okay, so here's what we're doing. Okay, after a lot of messing around, here's what we've got so far. So we are creating a document. We're creating a document of a certain name, and then we're going to make a copy of that document and add it to this folder, right? And what I'm going to do before I make a copy actually is I'm going to go ahead and edit the stuff that is in this doc, right? So in this document, when I make a copy, or actually before I make a copy, I can do something like doc dot. Let's see if we can edit content somehow. So let's do get body. Let's do let us. Why don't we? Let's add a paragraph. No, let's add a list item. How's that? Okay. So let's append a list item and we'll make the text whatever we have in our third column, right? Okay, so let's just run through what we're doing really here. We're getting the data. For every row in the data, we're creating a document. We're adding stuff to that document. We're adding text to that document. And then we're making a copy of it and putting it in a folder. So actually, I don't have a folder for this yet. So allow me to create a folder really quickly. And then the way you get the ID of a folder is you go into it and it's right up here at the end of your URL, right? So right here, that's the ID of a Google Drive folder. And you can just put that right in there. Okay. Now let's see what we've got here, guys. Let's see if this works at all. And obviously I'm gonna have to set my permissions again. Whew. And the way the ESC uses this and this sort of function for functionality is whenever we get applications or club reviews or whatever documents that we need to make a lot of, we can take every row in a spreadsheet and we can create a custom document for it, right? And so what that'll do is that allows us to have a bunch of documents in the folder and use it in that way. Okay, so let's see what we have wrong here. Oh, wrong. That's not what I wanted to do. Folder by ID here. And okay, my apologies. So it's creating what should be like, should be 8 documents, although it's probably created a bunch more because we didn't make it all the way. So let's see what we have in our folder here. There we go. So now it created these documents, and I stopped it short of doing all of them, but it created these documents, and it has an individual title for each of these documents. And inside of each of these documents, if I did this correctly, let's see when we open them up. It should have a custom list item as well. So let's see what we have. As you can see, code is a bunch of trial and error. Give it a second to load. Okay, so it didn't look like it edited the text, but for the sake of time, I won't sort of mess with that code and fix that right now. But you can now see that we can sort of copy docs, make it sort of based on the spreadsheet that we have, and create a bunch of docs in a folder, which is super cool to me. So yeah, so that's how that works. Last but not least, we're going to go into HTML a little bit. And I'm not going to be able to teach you what an HTML document looks like, right? But I am going to sort of teach you the basics of how to serve it using Google Apps Script. So you can basically create a website with this. So HTML is the language of websites, basically. So everything Inside a website, every element, every sort of word that's in a website, as we saw in our email, is defined by whatever is in the HTML. So for example, inside the body here that we're talking about, I'm going to add a header, and that's represented by h1, right? And so the way the HTML works is you open it up with whatever it is you're doing. So h1 is the sort of command for a header that's of maximum size, and it goes sort of down by size, h2, h2, h3, it's all the way to 6. And then you close it off at the end, right? And so when we serve that to a website, what you'll see is the big header and these words, whatever's in the middle, right? And you can do a bunch of different things with HTML. I really can't go into all of it right now. But within each of these sort of brackets, you can edit what it looks like. So for example, you can change the style, right? So we could say style equals font family Georgia or something, right? Actually, I'm going to leave it at Arial right now. But you can also do things like bold, right? You can make it bold, and that's sort of the very same coding. So that's sort of the bare bones of what an HTML document looks like. Now, what's really cool is you can turn this Google script into a website. And this is sort of how the service portal works, actually. And this is how you can basically create a website for free using Google Script. So the function that you have to do is called doGet, and that's just what Google makes you call that function, so that they know when you put in a URL that it'll direct you to this page. And what we return is an HTML service, because we're trying to create an HTML output based on that file that we have. We're going to create a HTML output based on our file. And our file is called index. Okay, and get content. So it turns it as a string. And that's really all you need to do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to publish this as a web app. And what that means is that you can get a URL, and you can essentially just display that HTML that we just saw. So deploy it. Let's get our URL. And hopefully what we can see here. Oh, that's wonderful. Let me edit that really quickly. I'm going to need to add permissions. Okay, HTML output from file. Next HTML dot. Excuse me 1 second as I check what it is that we have over here. This is the service portal, by the way. So, okay. Perfect. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of creating an output, we're going to create a template from file, name of the file, index, evaluate, and get content, which I believe is the right way to do it. Yep, okay. Turns out I was wrong, it's not get content. Okay, here we go, let's try this one more time. I need to publish one more time because I changed the script, and I'm actually gonna use the development code for this. So it updates as we update. And there you go. That is what you get when you can mess with HTML. So if you see what we did here is this HTML document that we have, it is being served to create this website that you see. And obviously you can go so much more in depth with HTML. Every website that you can see is obviously way more well developed and can do way more stuff for you. But that's basically what HTML is. Now to learn more about HTML, obviously I'm not the best person to teach you this either. But what I use most often is a website called W3 Schools. So what they have is they have basically a list of all the different things that you can do and that you can show in HTML, like all of these different types of headings, paragraphs, whatever it is that you're adding, and they'll show you how to use it. So if I just Google table, right? Let's say I want to put a table in my website. It can tell you all about tables, right? And so that's how I suggest that you go forward creating websites if you want it, and serving it from Google Script. Now, there is one benefit that is really, really awesome to Google Script, and that is that we can sort of take data from a spreadsheet and we can put it onto our website. So this is the last thing I'm going to show you today. But basically, let's say that I want to get, let's say I want to get the value of A2, right? And I want to put that in my website somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this really quickly. Say A2, get range A2, and instead of get values, it should be just get value because it's just one cell. Okay, so now we have that. And now when we're evaluating, we have to set a variable. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the HTML before we sort of load it to the website. And obviously we're later going to evaluate that. But in the middle, we're going to add a variable. So I can do something, say HTML dot, what's my variable name? Let's say, let's just say data. So HTML dot data equals this variable right here, this data. And what we remember, that's whatever is going to be in A2. So what that's doing is it's taking the value from the spreadsheet, it's sending it to the code that I have for my HTML, and the way I have to put it in is as what's called a scriptlet. So a scriptlet is just basically where you put it in and you call it whatever it is that you call the variable name back in Google Script, right? So remember we told it that HTML.data equals this thing right here, which is A2. And so I'm telling it on the website to take that variable and display it in, let's say, header 2. How's that? Right? So now what should happen if we save that and if we refresh our website, we should get another line of code that is displaying, there we go. It's displaying that date that we had in the second row. Now what if I change that? For example, and I refresh, bingo. That is incredible. So that is the power of combining Google Sheets with Google Script to sort of give a website and to promote a website and to put a website online. And so that's really the coolest thing that I can teach you today. And really, there's just so much more that you can learn with HTML and creating websites and making all of this database stuff happen. It is super cool. I implore you to sort of learn more about it. And yeah, so there you go. Free websites for everyone and using Google Script coding. Are there any questions on that section? Sweet. Yeah, there you go. That is all I have for you today. And that is hopefully enough to get you some pretty cool programs going forward with your management at SAS organizations.
Okay, so I'm